Well, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the WC Office of Employer Initiatives, I'd like to welcome you to the Business and Industry Upskill Forum. Today's session will focus on advanced technologies and manufacturing. I'm Muriel Thomas Borders, and I'm with the Office of Employer Initiatives, and I'm responsible for the Far West Texas region. So I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items before we begin. With the exception of the speakers, all the microphones should you have any questions that you wish to pose, you may do so by utilizing the chat function at the bottom of your screen. This will allow you to enter your questions, and the moderator will pose those questions towards the end of the panel discussion. We ask that if you're not presenting, that you do turn off your camera so that way we can preserve the bandwidth. This forum will be recorded and as such is subject to the state's open records laws. And our moderator today is Seth Green. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Seth. Seth.
Thank you, Muriel. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Seth Green with the Texas Workforce Commission Office of Employer Initiatives. I am responsible for Skills Development Fund outreach in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and the surrounding area, all the way up to Texoma, so way up north. I'd like to start by welcoming Chairman of the Texas Workforce Commission and a Commissioner representing the public, Brian Daniel, who will provide some opening remarks. Chair?
Well, thank you so much, Seth. Hey, appreciate everybody joining in on the call. I think this is about our fifth or sixth one of these, and probably more than that for the OEI team. This is really focusing on upskilling and some opportunities that we think we have for some folks. Zoom's been a pretty good way for us to do this, and I just really appreciate people carving out an hour or so out of your day to talk about something that I think is pretty critical for the state. We've got obviously the issues that the pandemic has given us in terms of unemployment and underemployment and all the different things that we're trying to work through right now. I know it's top of mind for a lot of employers in the state too, and yet we still read in the paper where new companies are coming into Texas and new opportunities will be available in the future. And I just think that for TWC particularly, us focusing on these kinds of issues on an ongoing basis, and here today we're talking about advanced manufacturing technology and how upskilling applies to that. For us to continue to pay attention to this serves actually millions of Texans. We've had a little over 4 million unemployment claims filed. Not that many people are getting paid. But it's a couple million there too. And so there's a number of people that are going to come out of this pandemic time and they're going to be looking for a job. It's no secret. It was well talked about that we had a little bit of a middle skills gap in Texas. We'd filled our high-end jobs, we'd filled our low-end jobs, and we were still looking for people to fill some really solid middle skills jobs. And I think as we look at different strategies for upskilling, certainly what our corporate partners are doing, some things that we're doing here at TWC, and combining those together, I think we can come up with some very strong strategies for the state. We have absolutely an all-star panel assembled today. And so I'm going to stop my opening remarks there because I think this panel that we've assembled is who we really want to hear from. Appreciate you guys letting me be involved. I'm going to stick around and listen to what this panel has to say, and I hope everybody else does too.
Thank you very much, Chair Daniel. Appreciate that. To all the panelists, on behalf of the Office of Employer Initiatives, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome today. We have a well-rounded panel of professionals with experience throughout the tech and, and manufacturing industries. Joining us today, we have Melanie Flowers, the head of technical training at Samsung. We have Mark King, Chairman and President and CEO of Micropac, Inc. We have Gary Tomerlin, Dr. Gary Tomerlin, I should say, mentioned earlier, Director of Government Relations and Strategic Initiatives at Tech Labs, and Randy Floyd, Program Manager for the Corporate Initiatives and Manufacturing Technology at Austin Community College. Our objective in these forums is to provide our partners with some tangible examples and information regarding employer needs around upskilling workers, as well as to provide some ideas regarding training areas in which we can assist in upskilling job seekers to get them back to work and on career paths for in-demand jobs, all while meeting business needs throughout Texas. So I'd like to start off by asking each of our panelists to give a short 2 to 3 minute introduction just to themselves and their companies. And we'll go alphabetically, and we'll start with Melanie. Melanie, if you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be on this panel, and I appreciate you all reaching out. Like you said, thank you, Seth. My name is Melanie Flowers, and I'm the head of technical training here at Samsung Austin Semiconductor. And here we manufacture integrated circuits for logic chips. So we have a
Awesome.
huge clean room facility here, and so we have lots of technical training going on.
Thank you very much. Mark, if you go next.
I sure will, and thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Mark King, and I'm with a company at MicroPack. It's outside of Garland, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas. I have served on the Texas WorkSource board, and I was also the first chairman of what you might recognize as the Dallas County Manufacturing Association. And I was also past chairman twice of the Garland Chamber, where the Dallas County Manufacturing Association works with Richland College, which is now Dallas College, I should say, in regards to the skills development funding grants. So very excited to be part of this and share with you some ideas that we have and kind of where we're headed. MicroPack is a public company. We do manufacturing, very special products. A lot we do with NASA and the Department of Defense. A lot of things go into classified satellite space systems. We have product on the planet Mars, and we have product that's about 30,000 feet below the surface of the Earth. So, you know, we do a lot of harsh environments and things that need to be very, have a lot of governance and a lot of quality control that's required for the electronics that we build and assemble. We do everything from components to full box level assembly and integration. And
Awesome.
with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on.
Sorry.
Thank you. And thank you. It's
Sorry.
a privilege to be here.
Thank you very much. Let's see here. Gary, would you please go next?
Thank you, Seth. I'm going to switch to my wide angle camera. My name is Gary Tomerlin. I work with Tech Labs. We're located in Katy, Texas, and we specialize in providing high-tech educational training technologies to schools, colleges, and universities. Myself, my background, I've been in education for over 20 years. I have been a college professor, department chair, administrator at a community college, and then most recently I was the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Workforce at the Higher Education Coordinating Board. So kind of an extensive education background, but then also education technology background as well. And I'm glad to be on the panel.
Awesome, thank you. And finally, last but not least, Randy, if you go next, please.
Thank you, Seth. Like you mentioned earlier, my name is Randy Floyd. I am the program manager. I handle corporate and business initiatives for the Advanced Technologies program here at ACC. Came out of the semiconductor industry where I spent almost my entire career with Motorola and then Freescale Semiconductor, and came to the college to really try to help solve some of the training issues that I felt we had when I was in the industry. And very fortunate to be here with my Hollywood Squares partner, Melanie, right there, who's probably our biggest success story. And hopefully she'll be able to tell you a little bit about that today. But again, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Awesome. Well, with that, let's just launch right into our panel discussion. First, and this is for each of you, so go ahead and think of your answers now, but how do you see new technologies changing workforce in terms of operations and training in the wake of COVID in advanced technology and manufacturing? And I think, Gary, you had some good stuff to talk about before the call, so if you'd like to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Seth. Well, I think new technology is just going to be more and more automated as we go forward. And maybe an example, I was thinking of this over the weekend. I ran down to the local Sam's Club near my house. My propane tank had ran out of gas and I needed a cylinder exchange. And so the machine is outside, it's self-serve. You put your credit card in the machine and then one door opens, you put in the empty cylinder, and then another door eventually opens and gives you a full cylinder. And so my point is, if you think about all the technologies that are involved there, the IT technology of doing the credit card transaction, and then the process of putting the empty tank, some kind of weight, some kind of sensors, the cylinders are rotating and moving, and the process all happens. And so you're going to see more and more technologies, robots and other types of sensors that are doing more and more jobs. Up in Milwaukee, they're building, I think it's 100 million square feet of facility to build flat screen TVs. Foxconn is doing that. And it's the future is the stuff that we used to see on TV when we were kids. Or maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody about an age point of view, but the future's here now.
Awesome, awesome. Randy, how about you?
Well, we had a really good chance, I think, and we had as everybody knows, we had a pre-meeting yesterday, and we had a chance to vet some of this stuff in advance. And one of the things that we talked about was how the pandemic maybe has caught a lot of us, off guard, obviously, but it's really just speeding up something that we've all felt was going to happen anyway, particularly as related to education, which is for advanced manufacturing, it needs to be more timely. We need to cut out some of the ways that we've done stuff in the past and make it more targeted. Melanie can already speak to some of this, things that we've done at Samsung, but as I said, I came out of the semiconductor industry. That's an industry that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if Samsung needs a class run at 2 a.m. in the morning on robotic fundamentals, we go out at 2 a.m. and run a class at Samsung and bring it directly to them. So I think that, COVID-19 is really just kind of speeding up some of the things for this industry as far as training is concerned that we knew was going to happen anyway. And we been kind of preparing for that for the last 6-7 years in developing the program that we've been working on, which is our Fast Track Manufacturing Program. And as we said yesterday, Seth, the Skills Development Fund has been huge in helping us get that done. We've had several good SDFs at Samsung, some at Applied Materials, NXP Semiconductor, and that's really helped us get to where we are today.
Okay. And speaking of Samsung, Melanie, would you like to chime in next?
Sure. I will say, the content of what we're training is that me echoing?
Yeah, if you're not muted, go ahead and mute. If you're not a panelist, please. Go ahead.
So what we need to teach our employees, it has not changed, but the delivery method has changed. Dr. Tomlin mentioned earlier all the technology that goes around this new environment, right? How can we be more hands-off and let the technology do the work? The need for training people on how to code those things, build those things has come up. And then also the delivery method in how we train has changed, as a result of COVID.
Okay. And Mark, would you like to go ahead and chime in for us?
I'd just like to confirm what everybody else said. We're seeing, I think that the key thing is that the change has been around now for a decade or a couple of decades, and we've been progressing along and kind of a evolutionary stage of training and education. And I think what the COVID-19 has done for us is accelerated that pace. It's a pace that we've been pursuing and it's been ongoing, but now I see it, taking a shift in terms of its accelerated pace, and that's encouraging. And so I'm really excited about that. Some of the technologies that are mentioned are not just technologies that we experience in every day-to-day life that we used to see on the Jetsons, I think what Gary was referring to. But we also see things that finally, we have virtual reality connected into education. We have robotics that's tied into how we can, use as an educator in implementation. I mentioned earlier before we started about, the doctors and the MDs are now being certified remotely with hands-on training to be certified to do lung ultrasounds, for instance, because of COVID-19. Things that are happening, I hope, will be here to stay. Now, in terms of what Brian wants to hear, and hello, Brian, by the way, good to see you again. I would like to just point out that, I think what's happening is educators need to consider being more of a service organization to customers, where the customers are the students being taught. And so that's a shift of a paradigm. And I think what comes with that is going to be unique in terms of how that technology that we currently have and the bandwidth of the technology that we have can be implemented in order to enhance the methods of which education is taking to the student, as opposed to the student has to go to a brick and mortar campus location in order to get educated according to the rules and regulations that the educators have put in place now for some time. So a lot of shifting going on that I see as a positive thing.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. On that front, now we're talking about virtual reality. We're talking about remote training, technology, manufacturing, medical too. But now that that's being done online, how do we ensure a viable training, viable certification? How do we ensure the value of the training when we're not doing it face to face? I guess, Mark, let's go ahead and start with you since we ended with you last time.
Well, I'm going through this with NASA right now and some certifications on how we do electronics, and we're building a display for the new manned capsule that called Orion program. You may have heard of it, and they pay close attention because this particular display tells them whether or not the parachutes go off or not when they land, and if they don't go off, they have to hit a manual button to do that. So it's a very important piece of equipment. And one of the certifications we have to have is for the operators to know how to do what's called staking. It's an electronic process using polymerics. And, we're working with NASA on a way to do that remotely and actually take the test that you would normally do, the hands-on test, and to validate that. And I think Gary has talked about too, and will, about how virtual reality and methods are being implemented in order to validate and pass the test where you have to do hands-on. That's the shift. That's the shift that I really look forward to, is where hands-on educated training and certifications that need to be done by employers can be done in a remote setting. And that technology is available. It's a matter of the educators, again, picking up on that technology to implement it.
Awesome, thanks. Well, let's hear from a business next. How about, training provider. Gary, what do you think on that, since Mark talked about you a little bit?
Well, yeah, thanks for the plug there, Mark. Well, I think, as we have discussed, there is virtual training now that is as close to reality as conceivably possible. And so I think we have to figure out how to implement that through, like, one of the e-learning suites that we represent here at Tech Labs, the virtual trainers. There's a CNC machine that virtually simulates milling a piece of metal. And so if the student puts in the wrong measurements, it cuts the metal wrong. And more importantly, you can actually take the same program that you created on the virtual simulator and put it on the live technology. And if you did it wrong, it would do it wrong on the live technology as well. And so my point is that from a virtual point of view, we are getting as good as real. And but I do think that I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is always important that we still have that hands-on piece. We have digital anatomy printers that doctors are using, and they use the x-rays and the body scans and the other technologies from real patients, and then they can print out that part of the human, so they can do a practice surgery before they do a real surgery, so they can create a copy of you. Seth, hypothetically, I'm not wishing bad on you, but if it was decided that you needed some type of brain surgery, they could take and they can recreate you. Kind of a scary thought there that I just gave myself, but but they could recreate you and do the practice. But then the hands-on piece is still the hands-on piece. And so there's all kinds of technologies that are taking it far beyond just the touch and feel. But the touch and feel is always going to be there, I think.
Okay. And Randy, since SDF has hitherto worked primarily through colleges, tell us what you think on this, maintaining the value of the training, and also, if you would, speak a little bit to the cost of it, because we're talking about virtual reality, we're talking about these 3D models, but that's, the technology is new and the cost is going to be there too. So let's know a little bit of that, if you would, please.
Well, I think this is a fairly sensitive topic because we're all sort of new to it, right? And so we're learning as we go. And There are some classes that we're teaching that are part of our fast track curriculum that are, I don't want to say well suited, but that they survive better in a virtual classroom environment. And so what we've done from the get-go with some of those classes, I'm talking about classes in business continuity, some disruptive skills that people are learning about how to manage better through this sort of environment. We're doing some immediate follow-up after the class is finished with the students to get their feedback and to immediately turn that feedback around into the next session. So whereas before you might think of it as an instructor evaluation that's very routine, we're kind of taking it a step further and getting very quick feedback turnaround on the student's experience in the class. I think it would be dishonest if I said that, oh, it's all going swimmingly well. What we are finding is that some of the classes are just fine online. Are just fine in a virtual environment. Others are going to continue to need to be some sort of combination of virtual and hands-on lab. The stuff that we teach in, in some of the primary logic controller classes and things like this, where the student actually needs to get their hands on the equipment, we're still going to need to do. And figuring out how to do that going forward is part of the challenge. But as we've started up, particularly with this most recent SDF COVID grant, we front-end loaded our courses with the stuff that we thought we could do virtually, and we could do virtually very well. And fortunately, we were correct. We have been able to do them quite well, and the feedback from the students has been extraordinarily positive. But as we move forward and get down, into this a little bit further, and we start to figure out which pieces of this are going to be virtual and which pieces still need to be done hands-on, that's going to be the challenge for us.
Okay, thanks. And Melanie, on that front, we're talking about maintaining continuity of training even in a virtual environment. And Randy talked about figuring out how to get stuff done. A lot of that's going to be a partnership between the business and the college or the grantee. The training provider is usually going to be the college, maybe a third party like Gary. What do you see from the company side, the corporate side, to build those partnerships to make sure that the cost is covered, to make sure that we can get enough people in? Who do we choose to train? Can you speak a little bit to that? Sure.
I will say that in industry, or at least in our company, what Randy's mentioned about the delivery is it parallels in business. There are certain things that have to be done hands-on in the classroom, but that partnership, to talk about or answer your question about the partnership, if I look at our employment ecosystem and how we've been able to reach out to a training provider such as ACC, and they have been able to adapt what we need, as Randy mentioned earlier, to what we need for our employees. But making those partnerships is important, and then having that dialogue of immediate business needs and what like schools like ACC or training providers like ACC can provide for us.
Okay, thanks. Next, I want to look a little bit about kind of short-term needs versus long-term needs, because we've all talked a little bit about, I think, well, maybe more than a little bit, about the fact that we're basically accelerating the evolution of learning, so to speak. What do you see? I think, Randy, we'll start out with you. What do you see as kind of the next step of that, the next step of that evolution, the next step of that change, and how much of social distancing do you see as not necessarily going to stay because we need it, but staying because now it's easier to do in a virtual environment?
The short-term needs versus the long-term needs, some of the things that we've seen is as companies are looking to get people into their business to bring them into advanced manufacturing, we've needed to solve some very immediate training concerns. And Melanie's very aware of this, what we've done with the Certified Production Technician certification. Several of our larger corporate clients have come to us and said, look, we need to have people better prepared from the get-go, so that when they hit the floor running. That's something that historically has not been done real well. And so some of the short-term needs is going to be figuring out how to get people prepared more quickly to enter into these advanced manufacturing environments. And then the longer-term need is going to be how to prepare them for next level jobs, upskilling as they move through with the right sorts of education. I personally have believed for some time, having come from, as I mentioned earlier, the semiconductor industry, that it's going to be done, it's going to need to be done in a much more efficient way than it's been done in the past. And while I could probably get roasted internally for saying that, 2-year degrees may not be the way of the future, we've been working on a very definitive path development where students can come in and get some training that will be immediately valuable to them, and then build upon that as they go through this fast track manufacturing program, and ultimately take a lot of that training and have it convert into credit hours towards a 2-year degree. So I think it's going to happen in a much more progressive, short burst fashion than it's happened previously, where everyone thought, well, you come out of high school, you go and you get a 2-year degree, or you get a 4-year degree, and then you go to work. In many situations, we're going to need more of a ongoing internship type program where we can take people right out of high school and get them prepared, get them ready to go with some of the things that we're doing, like the certified production technician, and then start to stair step them into more advanced education with some of these fast track learning courses.
Awesome, thanks. Mark, I don't think we've heard from you in a little bit. So the next question on this is, we just talked about short-term versus long-term, upskilling, maybe some reskilling some employees, and traditional education versus, kind of lifelong internships. Traditionally, my understanding with technology firms, engineering firms, stuff like that is you pull an engineer like that. Do we see that as the model going forward? What do you see as this ongoing internship in an advanced technology setting for a 4-year degree graduate or a 2-year degree graduate?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of subject matter in that question. First of all, just to kind of complement what's been said, we are more interested today than we were, say, 10 years ago in what degree somebody has. As we're more interested in their knowledge as opposed to their degree. In other words, we don't care what they hang on the wall with degrees. We care more about their knowledge. And then part of that knowledge ties into it the culture that you need to put in place, in the culture of creating a learning organization. And so as a business, running a business, I have to create the culture inside my company that is a learning organization. And if I can create a learning organization, then I can start to work on the skills and knowledge as technology matures through it. We can then grow and enhance the knowledge base. So be honest with you, one of my best process engineers does not have a degree on his wall, but he knows more about the processes we execute, and he's more valuable to this company than anybody else that might have an undergraduate or a graduate degree in engineering. So I think we're going to see a shift, and I'm seeing a shift towards the ability to take knowledge into a culture and implement solutions. Is becoming the critical barrier towards the success of the future manufacturing world, and adapting to that, I think, will be extremely competitive for the United States against other countries as we move forward into this new world that we're walking into.
Awesome. Gary, what do you think? Short-term versus long-term? And
Well, I think Mark teased this point out a little bit as he talked a bit about the difference between an engineer and an engineering technician. And a person with a 4-year engineering degree is a different skill set, generally speaking, than some of the stuff we're talking about in a smart automation setting. Randy talked about MSSC, the CPT, as kind of a entry-level platform. And I'll just do a pat on my back here a little bit for Tech Labs. We are the vendor in Texas for MSSC, the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. And so we represent them in this state and other states, but I won't do any more selling now. But the Commissioner Daniels mentioned middle skills. And I think a lot of what we're talking about falls into that category of middle skills. And what does it take to be prepared for that? And I think it's not static. And while We mentioned the CPT certification, which is a certification you can get out of high school. It's kind of an entry-level certification, and then it builds on other certifications that sequence and go up from there. And their MSSC has several certifications. The newest one is a certified logistics technician. And logistics technician is not so much about driving a truck, but it's about all of the sensors and other technologies that when we see the video at Christmas time every year where they show where all of the package delivering companies are just moving millions of packages a day, you know, that's the type of skill set that we're talking about. And because I did the Jetsons analogy earlier, I remember back in the late 70s or early 80s, whenever PCs started to become common, and I remember, because my background's computer science, it's like, well, why would you ever want a computer in your home? And of course, now 40 years removed from that, not only do we have 2 or 3 computers in our home, everything is computerized. And of course, we carry a portable computer around, meaning our phone, I can't talk, our iPhone or our Android with us all the time that has more computing power than you can ever imagine. You know, just think, what if we go 40 years in the future, will we all have robots in our house? Will we have robots doing household functions for us or other tasks? And I personally think the answer is yes. And what is it going to take us to move there?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. That's good.
Okay. Melanie, on that front, from a larger tech company, and Mark talked about the knowledge being a lot more important than the degree on your wall, but from a larger tech company, on some of the kind of middle skills, maybe a little bit lower skills, but still tech skills, do you foresee using Skills Development Fund to upskill existing employees, or do you foresee using it also to hire people with potential, bring them on board, and get them the initial training they need to get them up to speed to start the work? How do you see bigger tech companies using SDF?
In short, the answer is yes and yes. And we're actually executing that right now with the Central Texas Partnership. So we reached out to Workforce Solutions in December or Q4 of last year, and we said, hey, we are, and this is when Austin's employment was booming, and we were actually scraping the bottom of the barrel of the unemployment realm, if you will. So we said, how can we get more skilled employees coming into the organization? So if you can imagine a subway line with different stops, if you will. So before, we had always focused on, and for several years we've partnered with ACC and TWC using the Skills Development Fund for upskilling our existing employees. But we found a need that we needed some pre-employment training ever before they got to us. So we partnered with companies like AMAT, NXP, Cypress, all the semiconductor companies in our region, and said, let's get together and let's throw out on the wall all of the skills that we need for our incoming entry-level technicians and operators. So we put all that out there, and then we narrowed it down, and whatever was common to all of us, we said, hey, what industry or certification or credential can we tie to this? And MSSC's CPT is where we landed. And so we pitched it then to training providers and said, hey, all of these companies in our region have the need for these skilled employees. So who wants to train this? And of course, ACC stepped up right away. Skill Point Alliance stepped up right away. TC, Goodwill, they all said we want to play, right? And so getting that pre-employment training, and so I believe some skill development funds are being used for that, or some other kind of grants and funds are being used for that. So employers are now getting these people. We had 2 cohorts graduate, the second one just recently. So we've already hired 3 people from the first cohort, and so that's already working in our system. Now we have Skills Development Fund to upskill those that get hired with further skills, like Randy mentioned earlier, the robotics that they teach for us is invaluable in upskilling our employees. We also have a Fab Apprentice program where if they choose, they can go on and get their two-year degree, there's 5 that we've identified from ACC, so they can keep going. And then we have graduates there that want to go on with the Chevron program, and go to school at A&M, right? So there's a whole, if you want to go 4-year full or starting with the CPT, right? So all the way through your career, utilizing the invaluable funds that TWC is offering our local workers. That's awesome.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions from our audience yet. Oh, I lied. Melanie, how long are the training courses that you described to get entry-level employment?
So the CPT program, depending on the training provider, can go 4 to 6 weeks. And so there are online modules that are completed, and then usually the last week is a socially distant hands-on lab, so you can practice the skills.
Okay. Awesome. Not seeing any other questions so far from our audience. I will pose one more to you, just kind of a broader question to think about, because we talked about a lot of stuff that we need, a lot of the stuff that we expect to see in the future, a lot of evolution in the training and the workforce. I'd like to talk a little bit about challenges, both from an institutional standpoint and from a corporate standpoint. Just think about this and tell me one of the biggest challenges each one of you sees to implementing the virtual reality, the new training needs, and upskilling the workers in the COVID environment and in the future going forward in the technology and advanced technology and manufacturing sectors. Pardon me. And Gary, let's start with you this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's hard to pin it down to a single biggest problem. I always like it when we have 5 number 1 priorities. If you have 5 number 1 priorities, I'm not sure you have a number 1 priority. But anyway, so trying to pin it down to one. I think the biggest challenge from a school point of view is investing in the technologies and making the right investments. And they're expensive, but they're on the other hand, they're affordable over the long term. I've mentioned our e-learning suite, or not our e-learning suite, Amatrol's e-learning suite. You can get access to it for a year less than the cost of a couple of average textbooks. But the challenge with that is if the student doesn't get in there and take advantage of that year-long duration, then you haven't utilized the funds correctly. And so you've got to look at the cost, the longevity, and then some of the technology setting around me that I was demonstrating as we started, and you can see a little bit of it in the background. It's expensive, but then its life expectancy is long-term. And so that's my thought on change.
Okay, awesome. We do have one more question from the audience I want to address before we move forward. Have you seen an increase in companies using the apprenticeship model that highlights hands-on learning and educational components? Randy, if you'd like to chime in on this one, because since you're college.
Oh, I'm going to punt that to Melanie.
Okay, Melanie, go ahead.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Have you seen an increase in companies using the apprenticeship model that highlights hands-on learning and the educational components?
I will say we have been people have reached out to us to benchmark that program that we have. And it's been a few years in the making, and we finally ironed out all the wrinkles. But more and more companies are asking us, how do you set up this program? Which training providers do you use? So I have seen an increase in companies that want to benchmark our process for Fab Apprentice.
Awesome. And while I have you, challenges moving forward in the skills you need and the method to train.
So skills we need. I will say when the economy was booming, and like I said earlier, we were not getting the highest level of entry-level folks. For example, when we have a new orientation class, I would ask, can you tell me where you worked before? Do you have any semiconductor experience? And people were saying, you know, I was the cashier, and nothing against Dollar Tree, but I was a cashier at Dollar Tree 2 weeks ago. And we're hiring these folks to work on $1 million pieces of equipment. So we needed, our challenge is, how do we get people in the door that we don't have to teach, this is a Phillips screwdriver, this is a flathead screwdriver at a higher level. And so, like I said, we reached out to Workforce Solutions, pitched it to the training provider. So now we are getting that short-term need taken care of. But then again, the long-term is, how do you continue to grow and upskill those folks once they join your company. And so I think we are definitely on the right track. One other thing is that with all of the unemployment situation happening, our industries are going to see a lot of career changes. So somebody mentioned earlier about dealing with high school students, or talking, I think it was you, Randy, pitching it, somebody coming right out of high school. But we're going to be facing and having to train second career folks, people that may have worked in the service industry and said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be in a more solid industry. What skills do I need so that I can get in there? So we're going to see a lot of second career, third career type folks coming in that we're going to need to train and upskill.
Okay. We do have a couple more questions. I want to address these and kind of put the challenges on hold. So we've got those too. But are any of you working with high school students? I know, Melanie, you talked a little bit about that. But anyone else working with high school students? And is that something you could describe to our audience?
You want me to elaborate?
I guess so. Go ahead.
Sure. So one way we work with high school students is through a platform called Nepris, where we highlight various careers that we have here. And so Nepris is a company that puts industry and the classroom on the same platform. So we can talk about trades at Samsung. We can talk about engineering at Samsung. We can talk about any of the careers or jobs that we have here. But once they graduate, we have what we call a high school graduate intern program, where if they meet a certain GPA requirement and intend to enroll in ACC through one of the 5 degree programs that we've selected that help our business, they are interviewed and awarded a 10-week internship post-graduation. And if they do well on their project, then we progress them to what we call the Fab Apprentice program, where they go to school full-time and work for us part-time at ACC, or they go to school at ACC and work for us part-time, and we pay for their 2-year degree while they're going to school and working for us.
Okay. Awesome. We are kind of drilling down on time. So I'm going to ask Mark right quick, what keeps businesses from using community college completers from fast track certificates and associate of applied science degrees to staff manufacturing in a more systematic way, or advanced technology?
Well, I'm not sure I really understood your question. Help me with that.
What keeps businesses from using a community college graduates in a more systematic way? You know, we talk a lot about the 4-year degrees. What keeps businesses from looking just the 4-year degrees and not using the 2-year degrees in a more systematic way?
Well, I think we are. You know, I think we are attempting to do that in across the board for the reasons of the hands-on knowledge and the ability to go in and actually make a piece of equipment that doesn't work is the skills that are missing, you know, right now. For people to do, engineers to do simulations and designs and things of that caliber, those folks are more readily available than the people that can really get in and understand and do the work. So, you know, when I talk to my peers in industry, those that own companies that are in manufacturing, you know, we talk a lot about aptitude and attitude and the integration of a continuous learning organization. And maybe unlike Samsung, you know, I'm willing to say if I've got somebody in high school, out of high school, or, you know, even out of the industry, if they're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach. And then I tell you, we have used the Skill Development Fund in a very powerful way to impact people's lives. And I think that's something that everybody on this call really ought to understand, is how funding of education, if used efficiently, can really change lives. And I have watched it happen all the time. So yeah, we'll take the 2-year degree. We'll also take an employee and put them through some programs to accelerate their learning skills. But again, I want to point out the big shift that we have to do in education. And that is, first of all, inside of companies, we have to create a continuing learning culture within the company that's compatible with the learning and skills and knowledge that we need. Sometimes I look at leaders and I don't see them really visualizing how to make that happen. I think what we're talking about is the shift and the acceleration of that pace is enormous right now. And it's an opportunity for us to accelerate the pace of what we do in education.
Awesome.
And that's one other thing, what's one other quick thing, we look for things, people that can pay attention to details, and we look for people that can be project leaders and have ownership of it and facilitate sessions, have the people skills and the collaboration skills to make all that work. When you put those ingredients together in an individual, again, I will train them and educate them or put them through programs that can do that. That's the easy part. The hard part is to get the motivational and the people skills put together that makes it a learning organization work.
Okay, thank you. And Melanie, since again you're with Samsung, what do you see as a better way for community colleges to partner with the companies? Does this need to be formalized? Is it something that needs to go from company to company, or something the colleges can just set a system and say, here's what we're going to do now? We think this is a better way.
One thing I can say about Austin Community College is they listen, right? They truly live the community college, right? They're serving the community. And so when we reached out to them and said, we have these needs, they have adapted classes to meet our needs. For example, technical writing. They've adapted to how we lay out our specs and SOPs. They have created classes from scratch for us that we need, custom classes. So it's a matter of the businesses knowing that the community colleges are there, or other training providers are there and listening, and they've adapted. So it's about reaching out and knowing that they're available to you. I know some companies, the colleges will reach out and say, do you have any needs? And they don't want to hear it because it's a lot of work. But they're willing to listen and provide what the community needs in terms of learning.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're down, I think, the last little bit of time we have, and I think it's time for some closing remarks. So I'm going to turn it over to the Interim Director of the Office of Employer Initiatives, Dale Robertson. And Dale, would you mind popping your camera on and give us some closing remarks for the end of our time today?
All right. Thank you very much, Seth. Great job, and couldn't have asked for a better panel of experts and experience to join our discussion today. And Chair Daniel, thank you very much. Setting the stage for this discussion today, I think set it off on the right foot, and I think a lot of positive, great information shared. We had one more question that I want to throw out there because I love the audience engagement, and this question, and any of the panelists could pick up on this. It says, you mentioned an internship pipeline for students. Have you found more benefits or barriers having newly educated skills and progress individuals in the workplace? And the person adds, I sometimes get resistance and fear from employers. So the question is, what can, essentially it comes down to what can we do to communicate better with employers to overcome some of their concerns or fears? And it goes to Mark or Melanie, I think, really.
I will chime in on that and just support what Melanie said. She's right on target. We happen to work through the Dallas College Community College system, and they do listen and they do adapt. And I think that, we've got to be able to monitor what community colleges are going to listen and adapt to what we are asking for. And, we talked about it yesterday a little bit, is, we get just knowing what the skills are is like a first order. What really needs to be understood is what we need to do and how we need to change the way in which we communicate and the way in which we teach. And I'm going to be, and this is to you, Brian, be looking for those community colleges. I can tell you for a fact, because I've worked with them so long now, that Richland College here in Dallas listens, and they, as does apparently Austin Community College. I don't know how many others are doing that, but I think it's so imperative that we are able to measure that in a way that they can adapt to the changing needs. And if they're not willing to, if the educators are not willing to change, I think they're gonna be kind of passed by. And again, they're stuck with all the brick and mortar and the infrastructure and the administrations, when, you know, we can do this a lot better as companies when we collaborate together. And that's where the home run is. If we can change the way in which we partner with the businesses and the community colleges and other training institutions. It's not just community colleges, it's the training institutions that are out there. I'm excited about it. I'm very excited about it, but you can't pay an instructor $35 an hour and have them teach something and expect that to work for industry. That's just one example, you know, those kind of things.
Good.
Hey,
Thanks,
Seth,
Mark.
could I chime in on that real quick?
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I sent everybody yesterday a graphic of how we visualize ourselves serving the business community. And it was a corporate college graphic where, you know, I mentioned that after the downturn in 08 that hit the industry so hard, a lot of these companies lost their full-time training departments. And so we really were looking for a way to step into that void and help them out. And so that corporate college graphic that I shared with everyone shows all the companies plugging into us. And I said that while most of the curriculum suits everyone, it's always, as Melanie mentioned earlier, customized to their exact needs. And that has been the real benefit that I think that we've been able to provide to the advanced manufacturing community in the Central Texas area, is to be able to treat them, let them treat us as their corporate college and plug in, let everyone share a common curriculum, but let that curriculum be specifically targeted and shaped and formed to exactly what they need. As Melanie knows, we've been teaching a class for their new hire engineers that lasts about a week. So all the new hire engineers that come in, the first week that they're there, they're actually taking a class that we have built at Samsung's request that introduces them specifically to some of the modern semiconductor physics issues they're going to be facing, process chemistry, and things like that. So I think it's been remarkably successful that we've been able to step into that gap that was created back in 08 when the downturn hit. And I think that COVID-19 is probably just going to speed that process up.
Thank you, Randy. You know, the idea there is that, in summarize that whole conversation, is that educators need to learn how to take the education to their customers, as opposed to having their customers expected to come to them and have the privilege of their institution to learn. That's the shift. And you just expressed it. And that's where the home run is. That's where the benefit is. And I think because of the situation we're in, we're accelerating that curve. What a great thing for us to take advantage of. Really positive outcome of that would be a collaboration partnership where the educators are reaching out to the students, and they're not waiting for the students to be privileged enough to come to their institution. And that's across the board. That's everything from kindergarten to Harvard Business School.
All right.
Could I share briefly, Dale, can I share briefly?
Sure, please. Go ahead. I have time.
I can't tell the company, and I don't want to sound like I'm clandestine or something, but it's, you know, we live in corporate America, but we're working with a large multinational company that, if I said their name, you would all know their name readily. They operate extensively in Texas and virtually everywhere else as well, hence multinational. But we were actually in a conversation today, and they have developed a program with a college, and it involves Texas. That's why I'm telling the story. But they have also developing the same program over the next few years at 67 other colleges around the nation. But we were in conversation today of identifying 5 high schools to develop the feeder program that will support that program at that college. And so my point is there what Randy and Mark talked about is being done, and it's being done at scale. Perhaps it's not being done quite fast enough, but it's kind of a K-12 community college through employment alignment process. And my important takeaway from this is the employer has been highly involved in the alignment piece of this is what we want the outcomes to be. This is what we want the students to be prepared to do when they exit. And it's not only from a course point of view, a certification point of view, but in essence, the very foundational entry level point of view. And so, you know, we're kind of involved in accelerating it. And that's just one example of that.
Very good. Thank you. Melanie, I know in a way I let everyone have a closing remarks. Do you have anything to add or before we close out?
I would just say I appreciate this, that you all are interested in this, because in our region, we know we were booming before and we can get back there. And I just encourage everyone to hook into pre-employment training, hook into upskilling, hook into what TWC is offering you as employers, hook in your community colleges, but get your ecosystem. I call it an employment ecosystem. You'll hear more from me about that later, but your employment ecosystem in play, and it will work for your region, for sure.
Thank you very much. Chair Daniel, I see you there, and it looks like, you know, you were really engaged in this conversation. Do you have anything you want to add before we close out?
Well, no, nothing to add. We've covered a lot of ground, and we came at it from a lot of different angles. And I just detected a lot of agreement in some strategies that the state of Texas can and should be using to help make sure that we can get this workforce exactly how we need it to continue the growth trajectory we want to be on. To the panelists, thank you so much for volunteering your expertise. I think you've helped a lot of folks on this call, and to everybody who participated. You know, I hope this was beneficial to you. It certainly was to me.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you guys all. Seth, great job moderating. Muriel setting this up as well. In the background, we have Thomas Walker and Dolores Stacy, who gets things rolling, do all the technical work, and as well, Julia Mercado, who is our communication media person, specialist that takes care of all of our conference planning, et cetera. So again, I can't thank you all enough, panelists, businesses, educators, training providers, and for our audience. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Great questions today. And we hope you will join us for our next OEI Business and Upskill Forums coming up in another couple of weeks. So again, thank you so much, and have a great afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you all.